Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is R.S. Raghu, and with me is Navnita Adhikari, bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring to you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. India is a ray of hope for the world in the 21st century, says Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, addresses Indian community at Bali in Indonesia. India calls upon nations at COP27 to urgently shift from mindless consumption to mindful utilization of resources. India becomes the world's second largest producer of steel. In Israel, new members of parliament take oath as former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu holds talks on government formation. In United States, Republicans nearing majority in House of Representatives in midterm elections. Humanity hits the 8 billion mark, and Indian shooters bagged 4 more gold medals at Asian Air Gun Championship in South Korea. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said that the country is a ray of hope for the world in the 21st century. Addressing an event of the Indian community at Bali in Indonesia on Tuesday on the sidelines of the G20 Summit, Mr. Modi said India is moving with an unprecedented speed and scale today, and the country's talent, technology, innovation and industries have made their significant mark in the world.
भारत का टैलेंट, भारत की टेक्नोलॉजी, भारत का इनोवेशन, भारत की इंडस्ट्री, आज इन सारी बातों ने दुनिया में अपनी एक पहचान बनाई है। आज विश्व की अनगिनत कंपनियां ऐसी हैं जिसके सीईओ भारतीय मूल के हैं। आज दुनिया में जितने यूनिकॉर्न बनते हैं ना, 10 में से 1 यूनिकॉर्न भारत का होता है।
The Indian Prime Minister said country's self-sufficiency in medicines and vaccines during the COVID pandemic benefited the world. On close cultural ties with Indonesia, Mr. Modi said India and Indonesia are connected by shared heritage and culture.
बाली से 1,500 किलोमीटर दूर भारत के कटक शहर में महानदी के किनारे बाली यात्रा का महोत्सव चल रहा है, जिसे बाली यात्रा कहते हैं। ये महोत्सव भारत और इंडोनेशिया के बीच हजारों वर्षों के ट्रेड रिलेशंस को सेलिब्रेट करता है।
The Indian Prime Minister said there is so much that India and Indonesia have in common. He said at a time when the grand Ram temple is taking shape in India, India also proudly remembers the Ramayana tradition of Indonesia. The Indian Prime Minister said the accomplishments of Indian diaspora make the country proud. He said Indians are playing instrumental role in the development and prosperity of Indonesia.
21वीं सदी में विकास के लिए एक दूसरे के साथ कंधे से कंधा मिलाकर काम कर रहे हैं। इंडोनेशिया की जमीन ने भारत से आए हुए लोगों को प्यार से एक्सेप्ट किया, उन्हें अपने समाज में सम्मिलित किया। इसी वजह से आज आप सभी इंडोनेशिया के विकास और समृद्धि में योगदान दे रहे हैं।
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Tuesday addressed the first working session of G20 Summit on the issue of food and energy security at Bali in Indonesia. He said climate change, COVID-19 pandemic, the developments in Ukraine and the global problems associated with it have caused havoc in the world, and the global supply chains are in ruins. On Ukraine conflict, Mr. Modi called for a return to the path of ceasefire and diplomacy. He added that the onus of creating a new world order for the post-COVID period lies on the shoulders of G20 leaders. Mr. Modi said India's energy security is important for global growth, and the world should not encourage any kind of restrictions on energy supplies. Talking about COVID-19 pandemic, the Prime Minister said India ensured food security for its 1.3 billion citizens. At the same time, food grains were also supplied to many countries in need. He said the current shortage of fertilizers in terms of food security is also a huge crisis. Mr. Modi said India is promoting natural farming and repopularizing nutritious and traditional food grains like millets for sustainable food security.
On the sidelines of the summit, the Prime Minister of India met with the US President Joe Biden. During the interaction, the two leaders appreciated the continuing deepening of India-US strategic partnership and close cooperation in groups including Quad and I2U2. The two leaders discussed topical global and regional developments. India's Prime Minister thanked President Biden for his constant support for strengthening the India-US partnership. He expressed confidence that both countries would continue to maintain close coordination during India's G20 presidency. The Prime Minister also held brief discussions with French President Emmanuel Macron, Netherlands Prime Minister Mark Rutte and Indonesian President Joko Widodo. In the evening, Indian Prime Minister attended the G20 dinner this evening, hosted by Indonesian President. Sources said Mr. Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping exchanged courtesies at the conclusion of the dinner. In today's Hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on India's priority areas at 17th G20 Summit in Bali. In conversation are former diplomat Veena Sikri and AIR correspondent Lalima Anija Dang.
Ma'am, what are the challenges at the moment in general that you see for the summit?
We have to realize that in these recent years, the G20 has assumed a hugely important role in solving some of the world's major problems that have arisen. We've known, of course, that a lot of this could be done through the UN, but we do know that in the UN, the Security Council, dominated by the P5 and functioning of the UN and even the Bretton Woods financial institutions have not been satisfactory at all, especially from the point of view of developing countries. And so we did see in the aftermath of the financial crisis that the G20 formed in 1999 is now assuming more and more important role. India's chairmanship of the G20, which we are going to assume as of 1st of December, is being treated with the highest importance by Prime Minister Modi and the entire government of India. And they're attaching the highest importance to it because we do see through India's role as through the presidency of the G20 that India will have for 1 year from December 1, we do see a great potential for working towards solutions of many of the problems facing the world with the focus on the interest of the developing countries and the emerging economies. And this is significant because the problem very much in search for solutions to the financial and economic crises facing the world is the fact that this has been dominated largely by the Western economies, by the G7 members. And now we do see a chance for the emerging economies to play a role. If I can just point out one important point,
Sure.
that the Troika of the G20. The Troika includes the immediate past president, the current president, and the incoming president. Now, for the first time, as on 1st December, the Troika will have Indonesia as the immediate past president, India as the current president, and Brazil as the future president. For the first time, all three members of the Troika are strong emerging economies.
Right.
And this provides a vital opportunity for India's chairmanship to steer into solutions that will benefit the developing world in India's great commitment to Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The welfare of all is of vital interest. Now, what are the areas of focus for the G20 that we are looking at? The G20 emerged primarily to look at financial markets and the world economy. But we see increasingly that the G20 has been looking into issues like climate change, called lifestyle for the environment. These are assuming importance. Energy security, food security, women's empowerment. These are some of the issues that are more and more are taking up greater focus in the G20, and we do know that India, in its preparation for the presidency of the G20, has committed itself to giving importance to these aspects. And I think that we are planning in each of these aspects to see what India can do to bring solutions before the world and implement the solutions with the focus on the emerging economies. There are a number of groups. The summit for the G20 is being held right now in Bali, but India has planned for the next summit to be held in New Delhi in September 2023. But in the meanwhile, throughout the year, beginning 1st of December, we will be holding about 200 G20 meetings on different subjects in different parts of the country, all across India, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, as they say. So this is a massive task for India, but a massive opportunity for playing the leadership role and helping the world in the search for solutions on the vital issues that I just mentioned. There is a very interesting new area that is coming up beyond the 20 focus areas of the G20, and that is the R20. Indonesia, during their chairmanship, organized a meeting on religion 20. So what is the religion? How religious harmony can be brought about? And this is an important aspect for the world, and the world should focus upon it. Let us see what happens to R20 over the next few years, but it is certainly a very interesting new aspect. So in each of these areas of importance to the G20, we will get experts from those areas, from the 20 countries who will come to India, discuss, and will then work out the possible solutions and what we would like to do. A solution-based output of all these meetings is what we are looking at. And one can see in what a wide area that the G20 is looking to work in. If I can just mention some of the areas, you will see that the ongoing conversations, as the Ministry of External Affairs has said, revolve around equitable, inclusive and sustainable growth. This is a very important overall focus for the world. Lifestyle for environment, women's empowerment, digital public infrastructure. This is very important. India is a world leader in digital technology, and we want to share this with the world, and we want to look at digital public infrastructure and tech-enabled development in areas ranging from health, agriculture and education to commerce, skill mapping, culture and tourism, climate financing, circular economy, global food security, all these issues, how you can have a tech-oriented approach to quicker communication, quicker transfer of resources and benefiting the whole world.
Ma'am, generally, you said it very rightly about sharing knowledge. India can share knowledge about digitalization, as we know that a large number of digitalized payments are now happening, and even people at the bottom of the pyramid are going for that. Ma'am, you talked about developed and developing nations, and there's always been a kind of a subtle dominance, or sometimes not so subtle dominance, of the developed nations. When we talk of sharing knowledge, we give digitalization knowledge. We can ask them to teach us clean technology. So how do you think that this is going to be a good common platform as a melting pot of both the developed and the developing nations?
I think that this is a very good common platform. Now you see, even right now, the meeting is going on. And there again, the same clash between developed and developing countries. You know, how much of the present climate crisis is owing to what the developed country had been doing over the last 50 to 100 years since the end of World War II. I mean, what have they been doing? How have they achieved that development by trampling on the utilization of the equitable utilization of the world's resources, whether they're marine resources, forest resources, and all other kinds of resources. And now they want to put the blame on the developing world and make the developing world take a greater share of the responsibility for solving the problem. But we believe in common but differentiated CBDR, common but differentiated responsibilities. So this is like we have been doing in all the climate change conferences. So also for other issues, we want to find equitable solutions. We don't want any kind of confrontation between developed and developing world, but we want to find in a persuasive way, bringing the developed and developing countries together in the post-pandemic phase. I do not know if we are already in the post-pandemic phase or not, because there is the pandemic virus COVID-19 spreading in many parts, including in China. But whatever it is, during the lockdown of the COVID period, we did see the great disruption of supply chains, the great difficulties that many countries were facing because of disruption of supply chains caused by the lockdown. Now in the Ukraine crisis, we are facing another kind of serious difficulties on food security because of, Ukraine is such a major supplier of food grains, and we have other security-related issues emerging from the crisis in Ukraine. So, these are issues that we have to bring on board. Russia is a member of the G20, and also to tackle the energy security, India has already declared that we are going to be inviting special invitees for the G20 Summit in India. And these include countries like the UAE, Arab Emirates, countries like Oman, countries like Bangladesh. So we are looking at a very balanced focus on development, bringing together emerging and emerged economies on a common platform.
Right, you talked of energy. Already, Prime Minister initiated the International Solar Alliance, in which more than 100 countries are taking part. So we are poised to take a leadership role in G20 as well. This is happening. You talked about the Russia-Ukraine war, which is very significant. The fact that the summit is happening in the background of the Russia-Ukraine war. How successful we can be in terms of food security, because there is a bit of tussle going on as far as food grains is concerned, and Ukraine was such a hotbed of growth of grains and export of grains.
We are very conscious of this aspect of food security because it affects not only us but many other countries of the world. Fortunately, right now, India is in a stronger position on the question of food security, and we have bailed out many countries who are in dire need of food grains as a result of the Ukraine crisis. And the world has recognized how India was immediately able to come to the rescue of many countries who are in a very difficult position, and India has promised to continue. For example, another thing in India is focusing on other grains like millets, for example, and we declared an international year of millet, and we are telling the world that we must look at other food grains as well to meet the world's food security, so that we are not just with wheat and rice. And India is again playing a leading role in that, because not only for other countries but within our own country, this focus on millets and other food grains is going to be of great value, because these food grains are not only equally, if not more nutritious than wheat and rice, but they grow quickly, they grow in arid areas, they do not need the kind of care and excessive water supply that wheat and rice do. So we are leading from the front in this field as well, and we're doing it in our own pattern of development. Even before the G20 presidency has come upon us, we have been working ahead to take the leadership on these fronts within India and to help the world. So this focus of India's visionary approach, Prime Minister Modi's visionary approach to Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, helping the world and helping us to help the world. So this aspect has been very strongly recognized. And also another aspect of the G20, the security dimensions are being looked at, and we also seeing the whole importance of the Indo-Pacific coming out right now, with the active role that Quad is now playing and the formation of AUKUS, Australia, UK and USA. We do see all this coming along to focus on the ASEAN and the ASEAN centricity of it all. And in this very context, we had a very strong participation to the Vice President of India in the ASEAN Summit conference, which was held in Cambodia. It just finished, in fact. So all these issues were also discussed there, and India and ASEAN now have a comprehensive strategic partnership. So all these aspects will also blend into what is going to happen during the year of India's presidency. All these aspects will be woven into it, because we have seen after, especially as a result of the Ukraine crisis, that the security situation, cyber security, just physical security, defense, protecting your borders, all this has become very important, and India is prepared to play its role in helping other countries in this world, in this aspect.
Thank you for your views and reviews.
Thank you.
This is All India Radio giving you the world news. For quick news updates round the clock, follow us on Twitter at AIR News Alerts.
Welcome back to World News. India's Environment Minister Bhupendra Yadav has stressed that the world urgently needs a paradigm shift from mindless and destructive consumption to mindful and deliberate utilization. Delivering India's national statement at COP27 at Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt on Tuesday, Mr. Yadav said that as the world's most populous democracy and a vibrant emerging economy, India seeks to lead by example. He invited the global community to be a part of Mission Life for individual, family and community-based actions. Mission Life was launched by Indian Prime Minister Mr. Narendra Modi in the presence of UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on 20th of October this year. It stands for Lifestyle for Environment, which is a mantra at heart of India's vision of a safe planet. The Indian minister said India is undertaking an arduous effort to fight climate change despite accounting for less than 4% of the world's cumulative emissions so far. He said Prime Minister Modi announced India's aim of achieving net zero emissions by 2070 at Glasgow Summit last year. He said that within 1 year, India has submitted its long-term low emissions growth strategy indicating low carbon transition pathways in key economic sectors.
India updated its NDC in August 2022. We have embarked our far-reaching new initiatives in renewable energy, e-mobility, ethanol-blended fuels, and green hydrogen as an alternate energy sources. We also seek to foster strong international cooperation through action and solution-oriented coalitions like International Solar Alliance and Coalition of Disaster Resilience Infrastructure, both of which are launched and nurtured by India.
India and Sweden hosted the Lead IT Summit on Tuesday on the sidelines of COP27 Summit. The Leadership for Industry Transition Lead IT initiative focuses on low carbon transition of the hard to abate industrial sector. In his opening address, India's Environment Minister emphasized that co-development is the only option to meet the targets that the world has taken for itself, and without it, low-carbon transition could be delayed by decades. He said the low-carbon transition of the industrial sector will not only contribute towards the reduction in required greenhouse gas emission. The summit concluded with the adoption of the summit statement by the members of Lead IT, which re-emphasized the commitment to continue pursuing the low-carbon transition of the industry.
India has moved up to become world's second largest producer. Indian Minister of Steel Jyotiraditya Scindia said this during the Steel Conference of State Governments in New Delhi on Tuesday.
India has traversed a long journey over the last 8 years in the sector of steel. From a country that used to be a net importer of steel, we have now graduated to becoming a net exporter of steel. From the fourth largest producer of steel 8 years ago, on a global scale, we are today the second largest producer of steel. But we are also the second largest consumer of steel.
Speaking about the growth of steel consumption in the country, Mr. Scindia said in case of installed capacity of steel, the country has moved from 100 million tons a year to almost 150 million tons. Mr. Jyotiraditya Scindia also informed that the country has registered a tremendous growth in the steel production. Indian Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan today held a meeting with Finnish Minister of Education, Science and Culture Petri Honkanen in New Delhi. During the meeting, both the ministers discussed topical issues of education in the challenging post-COVID times. They also had fruitful discussions on making knowledge a priority pillar of the bilateral cooperation and deepen engagements in all areas of education, skill development and frontier research. They also discussed the path-breaking educational reforms currently underway in India.
In Israel, new members of parliament or 25th Knesset took oath on Tuesday as former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is holding talks with allies on forming a coalition consisting of right-wing partners. Of the 120 lawmakers of the 25th Knesset elected on 1st of November, 64 have endorsed Mr. Netanyahu to lead the next government, clearing the way for his promised comeback after just 14 months in opposition. The Knesset Central Elections Committee is an official, autonomous and self-contained body. The major function of the Knesset is to legislate laws and revise them as necessary. The majority secured by Netanyahu's Likud party and its allies, two ultra-Orthodox Jewish parties and the rising far-right religious Zionism alliance, is expected to usher in a stable government, ending an unprecedented period of political gridlock that saw 5 elections in less than 4 years. In the United States, Republicans are on the brink of taking control of the House of Representatives after 3 race calls went in their favor on Monday. Nearly a week on from the midterm elections, 3 race calls in California and New York pushed the Republicans to 217 seats, one off from the 280 needed to command a majority. On Monday evening, Michelle Steele and Ken Calvert were both re-elected in California after close-fought races against their Democratic rivals. The party had expected an overwhelming victory in the lower chamber of Congress due to high inflation and dissatisfaction with the Biden administration, but there was unexpectedly strong support for the Democrats, who have controlled the House since 2019.
A baby born somewhere on Tuesday will be the world's 8th billion person, according to a projection by the United Nations. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres in a statement said the milestone is an occasion to celebrate diversity and advancement while considering humanity's shared responsibility for the planet. We have a report.
The UN attributes the growth to human development, with people living longer thanks to improvements in public health, nutrition, personal hygiene and medicine. It is also the result of higher fertility rates, particularly in the world's poorest countries, most of which are in sub-Saharan Africa, putting their development goals at risk. The UN's Population Division Director, John Wilmot, said that reaching 8 billion people is a sign of human success, but it is also a great risk for our future. According to the annual World Population Prospect Report released on Monday, India is projected to surpass China as the world's most populous country during 2023. The report also notes that the global population is growing at its slowest rate since 1950, having fallen to less than 1% in 2020. The latest projections by the United Nations suggest that the global population could grow to around 8.5 billion in 2030, 9.7 billion in 2050 and 10.4 billion in 2100. Renu Kataria for World News.
Countdown has begun for the launch of new mega moon rocket Artemis 1 on Wednesday from Kennedy Space Center at Florida. American Space Agency NASA said that it plans to launch the new moon mission after 2 failed attempts. Artemis is the most powerful rocket ever designed by NASA. It will be the first integrated flight test of NASA's deep space exploration systems that will enable human exploration to the moon and Mars.
An international travelling exhibition, Vaccines Injecting Hope, opened at National Council of Science Museums NCSM in New Delhi on Tuesday morning. NCSM and Science Museum Group in London have joined hands to tell the story of the global effort to develop vaccines at higher speed. The exhibition aims to decipher the science of vaccines and tell the story of how they were developed. The key domestic stock indices on Tuesday witnessed modest gains, recovering early losses. A report from the business desk.
The Sensex climbed 249 points or 0.4% to close at 61,873. The Nifty also rose 74 points or 0.4% to end at 18,403. At the global stock markets, Asian stocks witnessed gains. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index jumped 4.1% and China's Shanghai Composite Index climbed 1.6%. Singapore's Straits Times rose 0.4%. South Korea's Kospi added 0.2% and Japan's Nikkei added marginally by 0.1%. European shares were mixed in intraday trade. Oil prices fell more than 0.5% as rising COVID-19 cases in China renewed fears of lower fuel consumptions from the world's top crude importer. In intraday trade, Brent crude was trading at $92.70 per barrel. And in the forex market, the rupee strengthened 16 paise against the US dollar. The domestic currency closed at 81 rupees and 10 paise against the American currency. Nishit Kumar for World News, All India Radio.
At the Asian Airgun Championship in South Korea, India on Tuesday won 4 more gold medals in air pistol events, taking their tally of yellow medal at the tournament to 17. India's Shiva Narwal won gold in the men's 10-meter air pistol event. Another gold fell in India's kitty through Sagar Dangi in junior men's event. In addition, both the Indian men's and women's youth teams clinched gold medals for the country by winning their respective competitions. India's Vijayveer Sidhu bagged bronze in the same event. Indian men's youth team captured gold in the 10-meter air pistol team event. Now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. The Financial Times reports that Donald Trump expected to announce 2024 U.S. presidential bid from Mar-a-Lago. The Guardian report says Ethiopian rival agree on humanitarian access for war-ravaged Tigray. The Wall Street Journal reports China's economy takes a deeper hit as retail sales turns negative. The Washington Post says Indonesia tries to go green for G20, but it just can't quit coal. Japan Times reports that election denier Carrie Lake closes governor's race in battleground Arizona.
And now a quick look at the headlines once again. India is a ray of hope for the world in 21st century, says Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi addresses Indian community at Bali in Indonesia. India calls upon nations at COP27 to urgently shift from mindless consumption to mindful utilization of resources. India becomes the world's second largest producer of steel. In Israel, new members of parliament take oath as former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu holds talks on government formation. In United States, Republicans nearing majority in House of Representatives in midterm elections. Humanity hits the 8 billion mark. And Indian shooters bagged 4 more gold medals at Asian Airgun Championship in South Korea. And now, before we end, let us listen to Mahatma Gandhi's favorite bhajan Vaishnav Jan by artists from Palestine.
Vaishnav Jan to teni kahiye
With that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.